Where I come from, it's very easy to get yourself mixed up with people doing drugs and alcohol, people living a loose lifestyle and not serving God at all. I went through such a period in my life where I did a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol. Started at about the age of 13, and this lifestyle continued right through to the age of 37. I thought this was my life. I would never be getting out of it. This is the way I would be for the rest of my life. I'd always eyed this building in town. There was a tall building, and I'd said, when I've had enough, I'm going to the top of that building and I'm going to jump off of there. And one particular Sunday morning I went to this building and I was about to jump when a voice spoke to me and said, consider your son. I thought about it and I thought, okay, I'll give life one more chance just for the sake of my son. God already knew then that I didn't care whether I'd lived or died, because I didn't believe there was a God, and I didn't believe my soul would go to hell. And so I walked down that building and I thought, for the sake of my son, I'll give life one more shot. But the next day I decided I'd go for help, find some help somewhere, and I went to an institution where they deal with drug and alcoholism, and I ended up in a meeting there. And every single person in this meeting said, by the grace of God, they were healed of this, and by the grace of God, they were delivered from that. And all the time as they prayed and as they spoke their testimonies, it just made me angrier and angrier, because I thought, I've come here for help, and all these people are praying to God, and there is no God. How do they know there's a God? And each person had a story of how their lives had become destroyed through drugs, through alcohol. And every one of them said, by the grace of God this, by the grace of God that. And I thought to myself, what a lot of rubbish. But I ended up going to bed that night, and when I got into bed, for some strange reason, I lay down in my bed and I said, Jesus, if you really exist, I really need help. Please help me. And right at that moment, it felt like there were waves washing over my body. The first wave was love. The second wave was forgiveness. The third wave was love. The fourth wave was forgiveness. And this just kept on going on and on and on. And it was the most refreshing feeling that I've ever had. And I fell into a deep sleep. Possibly the most relaxed sleep I've ever had. And I woke up, and the next morning I just felt so refreshed. I went outside and I looked, and I could smell the air again, and I could see the trees, and I could see the sky, and I could see the clouds, and I noticed everything around me like I haven't done since I was a young kid. There was just a total change in everything, the way I saw everything. But I realized he had done something in my life, and I kept praying to him, and I kept praying very faithfully, praying to this Jesus. But I didn't dare tell my friends that I'd even mentioned the name Jesus, because that was my best kept secret. I used to go down to the beach in the mornings, and I would walk down the beach, and I'd get to the end of the beach at 6 in the morning, and I would pray on the rocks. I don't know what words I prayed exactly, but every morning I'd do this, and I'd be stoned out of my mind, but praying to this Jesus whom I sensed touched my heart that evening. And as I prayed on these rocks every day, and I just walked back faithfully, and I just knew something in my life had changed. And on one particular morning when I was sitting on these rocks, I heard a voice say to me, Adrian, I know you have trouble believing. You see, God knew I'd been an atheist for many years. But God said to me, I want you to follow the sea as it goes out. Now, where I come from, we have really big waves in the sea. They have surfing competitions there. But I listened to the voice, and I ran out behind the sea as far as it was pulling out. And I stood at the edge, and I was waiting for the waves to come pound me and to just flood right over me. And as I stood there, the waves rolled out right up to my toes, and they stopped miraculously in front of my toes like this. And the first time I thought, that's a coincidence. And the second time I thought, that's a coincidence. And the 8th time I thought, another coincidence. And the 10th time I thought, this is still a coincidence. And the 11th time I realized there's no coincidence in this. God is showing to me that he really exists. And I started crying right there. I started crying, and as I cried out, it was tears of joy. And I cried out, He really exists, He really exists. And I ran all the way up the beach crying, He really exists, God really exists. But that wasn't the end, because it still hadn't stopped me taking drugs. It still hadn't stopped me doing anything I was doing. And things went literally from bad to worse, because once again I got involved in hard drugs. And I was living in a hotel, and I was playing guitar for a living. And I would get any amount of hard drugs I wanted, free of charge, because I was living in the hotel and they all knew me. But God soon moved me out of that place. I happened to get a job 100 kilometers away from there. When I got to this new hotel, the owner of the hotel turned out to be a born-again Christian. And she told me all about Jesus. And she said to me, "Do you know anything about Jesus?" And I told her my experience about the night I prayed. And so she led me to the Lord. She bought me a Bible, and I ended up going to church with her. She never told me, "You must stop smoking that stuff that you're smoking." She never said anything like that. And by this time, I'd already moved away from the hard drugs, and I was using very little of them. I'd been at the hotel for a few months. And on one particular occasion, one evening, God spoke to my heart. And He said to me, "I want you to take all the marijuana you've got in the room, and I want you to take it and smoke it finished, and tomorrow be finished." I said, "Lord, if I don't smoke this stuff, I'm miserable when I wake up. I treat people badly." I said, "Lord, if I don't smoke this stuff in the evening, I can't cope to get through the evening. And God, if I don't smoke this stuff before I go to bed, I can't sleep and I have nightmares." I was believing all these lies. God just kept quiet. He didn't say a word back. So I asked God, I said, "Lord, if you could speak to my heart, speak something into my heart." And I pulled my Bible out, and I flipped it open with my eyes closed, and I put my finger down in a place, and I looked down where my finger was, and it landed exactly on Joel 1, verse 19. The first time I'd ever got something from God in my whole life, just so clear, written in front of me. And it said, "I cry out to you, O Lord, because fire has devoured the grass and the trees of the pasture." I don't think the Bible could have said anything more accurate to a person who smokes grass. Well, I went into that room and I smoked everything there was, and I threw everything away. And I've been totally delivered from any form of drug addiction, any form of substance use whatsoever since November 1999.
Lord, who am I that you consider me?
Since that time, God has used my guitar playing talent and my singing to reach people. I go to drug rehabilitation centers, and I speak to people daily about the salvation and the freedom that comes from knowing Jesus Christ. So I want to challenge you to this. If you have a problem with drugs, with alcohol, or with any other kind of bondage, if you take that step of faith and you just put your belief in Jesus Christ, knowing that He can do it for you, that is exactly what He will do. If you just call out to Him and say, "Lord Jesus, come and live in my heart," He will respond to your voice and to your cry, and He will come and live in your life and take charge and manage your life too.